The Minnesota Vikings lose another close game. It has been the same story all season long where the Vikings either win by one score or lose by one score in every game so far this season other than the Seattle game. Vikings lose 26 to 20 or 26 to 34 against the San Francisco 49ers, moving to 5 and 6 on the season. It was fun being a 500 team while it lasted, and fall to the 7th seed in the playoffs as the San Francisco 49ers move to the 6th seed. Vikings fall to the 7th seed, and there's 5-5 win teams in the NFC right now, but Vikings lose again, another close game. So it was the same story. Minnesota Vikings team in the first half, we have a lead. Vikings have a lead once again. Vikings have had a 7-score lead or more in every game so far this season. Vikings open with a 7-score lead on the second drive of their offense to a touchdown to Adam, touchdown Thielen, and the Vikings go into halftime 14-14 scored. So, going into halftime at 14-14 is not a comfortable spot you want the Minnesota Vikings to be. As a matter of fact, I'd rather be losing going into halftime because it feels like every time we're tied or have a lead going into the half, the Minnesota Vikings decide to blow it into the third and fourth quarter. The third quarter was a very eventful one as the Minnesota Vikings had 2 touchdowns in that quarter, but the 49ers had 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals in that quarter, so the third quarter had a total of 32 points scored. Should have been 33, but Greg Joseph doesn't know how to make extra point kicks. Pretty regular for our Vikings team. So it was the same story that we see all season with the Minnesota Vikings, losing a very important game, and Kirk comes flat. I mean, Kirk just had a bad day. And you take a look at this Minnesota Vikings team as a whole. If you made a list on why the Vikings lost this game, would Kirk even be first on that list? No, he wouldn't. It would be the Vikings defense, who has been terrible all season long and continues to look bad. Now, we knew the 49ers have won. They're 6-5 now. The 49ers are 6-5 because they dominate in the trenches. Their offensive line is phenomenal in the trenches. Their defensive line is the same story. That is how the 49ers have won every game so far this season, and how they're going to continue to win, as they had over, I believe it was it over 208 rushing yards on our defense and 3 rushing touchdowns on our defense. The Minnesota Vikings defense does not know how to tackle. Our linebackers, Anthony Barr, we're paying him this much money and he can't tackle. Nick Vigil, you've been playing in the NFL how many years? 6 years. You can't tackle. I mean, our defense as a whole. And we knew going into this game, we were without our entire first-team defensive line. Our entire first-team defensive line that we started this season out with was not here to play. And we knew this going into the game. I mean, but with that being said, it's not like our defensive line should be this bad. Okay, you have DJ Wanham, who has been phenomenal throughout his career, has actually impressed everybody throughout his career, being a 4th-round draft pick out of South Carolina. You have Armon Watts, who's been even more impressive, still starting at the inside linebacker or inside defensive line position. You have, of course, James Lynch. I mean, not high expectations for James Lynch, but still, he's a solid player. And then you also have Sheldon Richardson. Just like I said with Nick Vigil, Sheldon Richardson, how many years have you been in the NFL and still continue to not be able to tackle players half your size? Minnesota Vikings defensive line had a terrible game, and the defense as a whole had an awful game. Are we going to ignore the fact that Mackenzie Alexander has been this bad? I mean, we continue to bring up how bad Bashaud Breeland has been. We continue to bring up how disappointing Bashaud Breeland has been as a starting corner. Can we stop ignoring the fact that Mackenzie Alexander is the worst player in our Vikings defense as a whole, who has played as many snaps as he's played so far this season? And the Vikings don't even need to play him. They don't. The Vikings have no reason to continue to play Mackenzie Alexander week in and week out, who has lost us multiple games and gives up at least 1 touchdown every game to no-name wide receivers. Mackenzie Alexander, and I've said this multiple times, Greg Joseph is not the reason why the Vikings lost against the Arizona Cardinals. It was because of Mackenzie Alexander giving up crucial 4th-down plays to the opposing offense. He is the worst player in this Vikings defense, even worse than Bashaud Breeland, and Bashaud Breeland they are the 2 most disappointing players in this Vikings defense. And going forward, we're going to talk about how the Vikings can fix this defense, because if you're making a list on why the Vikings lost this game, defense is number 1, no question. Now you look at who's number 2. What's number 2? Now, Kirk Cousins. Okay, we're not going to slander Kirk Cousins completely in this episode, and we're pretty big Kirk Cousins lovers here. I mean, he's our quarterback. You have to get behind him. He's having a career year. I mean, he's having the best year of his entire career this season, and is having an MVP caliber season and is looking amazing. Yeah, well, he did not in Sunday's game against the San Francisco 49ers. You know who did have a good game though? The refs. The refs were not playing for us. The refs were playing for the San Francisco 49ers all game. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Vikings versus refs, and refs are the reason why we lost. But they had two crucial calls. Adam Thielen clearly caught that catch. He came down with the catch. Mike Zimmer was right to throw the challenge flag there, and they didn't overturn it. It was a clear completion. And that wasn't enough for these refs. No, they decided on the game-winning drive for Kirk Cousins when he had to go the entire field to get his offense 8 points to tie it up to go into overtime. There was a blatant pass interference. I believe it was on Justin Jefferson. Yeah, there was a blatant pass interference on third down. The refs are blind. They didn't see it. If all of us Vikings fans can see it, they can too. And I just don't understand why the refs continue to be this bad on our Vikings team. I mean, the refs haven't been as bad as they were 2020 for our team, but again, this is another game where the refs were a key factor on why we lost this game. Were they the biggest? No, that is obviously our Vikings defense, and maybe even more Kirk Cousins, who had an awful game. Just a bone. Where was his head? Where was Kirk Cousins' head in this entire game? I mean, you have an offense. You're throwing to players like Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson. You're throwing to the best wide receiver tandem in the NFL. Second best. I have to put them behind the Buccaneers right now. You're throwing to the second best wide receiver tandem in the NFL, and you're throwing an easy interception for the 49ers defense. You throw to the feet of Justin Jefferson on a 2-point conversion. You line up behind your right guard. Okay, those are 3 bonehead mistakes from Kirk Cousins. Not to mention the fact that he overthrew his receivers. I counted 4 thrown targets, and I believe they were all wide open. I might have to recount that. I will watch the game. I rewatch the game every Tuesday, but I can't rewatch the game after that happened. But I believe he did overthrow his targets 4 times and grounded the ball in a 2-point conversion, which, by the way, he was throwing on the run. I understand throwing on the run is difficult, but you're throwing to Justin Jefferson. He should be able to catch anything that doesn't hit the ground. But again, you're throwing to Justin Jefferson. Just run it in. At that point, just run the ball in. He had an open lane to run it in for a 2-point conversion and grounded the ball. Minnesota Vikings had it was a right call to go for the 2-point conversion. It wasn't a right call for Kirk Cousins to even throw the ball there. Even though Justin Jefferson was wide open, he could have ran the ball in for an easier 2-point conversion. Would you rather throw to a wide open Justin Jefferson or take 3 extra steps to get a 2-point conversion? Yeah, you're taking the 3 extra steps because Kirk Cousins is not slow. I will say that again, Kirk Cousins can run. He just doesn't. He decides to always sit inside the pocket, and this is a big problem on why the Vikings lost this game. But the defense is number one. That Vikings defense doesn't know how to tackle, and the 49ers offense just owned us all game, dominating in the trenches, having 3 rushing touchdowns, and the Vikings defense allowed 208 rushing yards. We're going to not dismiss the fact that we were without our entire first-team defensive line. Dalvin Tomlinson was out with COVID. We knew it was going to happen because all of our players are unvaxxed, and COVID just continues to run through our locker room. So without him, we had James Lynch starting. Huge decrease from Dalvin Tomlinson. Armon Watts playing over Michael Pierce has been okay. I'm crediting Armon Watts. We love Armon Watts in this podcast. I mean, we're big fans of him. DJ Wanham obviously starting over Danielle Hunter since he's been injured. But we also had Sheldon Richardson, who was playing over Everson Griffin as he's dealing with some personal issues right now. Hope Everson Griffin continues to fix that. But again, Sheldon Richardson is no defensive end, and you should see more of Patrick Jones going forward. Sheldon Richardson is a very good 3-tech, a backup 3-tech, and should be playing over James Lynch and not at the defensive end position. I didn't hate the call to actually play Sheldon Richardson as a defensive end, but now, next week, you shouldn't play him as a defensive end. I mean, I think Andre Patterson learned his lesson here because I called it. I said that Andre Patterson was going to play Sheldon Richardson as a defensive end because Patrick Jones is a rookie. And Vikings coaching staff does not like to rush the rookies into the starting position. They had to last year with DJ Wanham. This year, they really don't have to. But now going forward, I want to see more of Patrick Jones than any other player on this Vikings defense right now because, Cameron Dantzler. Any other player on this Vikings defensive line right now because he should be at the Vikings defensive end position. I really don't know what I'm missing here. I don't know what I'm missing. But as a whole, Vikings, we covered all the bad. There is some good to cover here because this Vikings offense, we know how good we are, and it just continued to show against the 49ers defense. I mean, let's just credit Dalvin Cook real quick because I hope he gets well. I hate to see Dalvin Cook get injured. He gets injured every single year. He has yet to play an entire season in the NFL where he was not injured at least one game. But again, Dalvin Cook going up against the 49ers defense, which has been one of the best against the run with Fred Warner. I mean, Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead. Do I have to keep going on? They have been one of the best defenses against the run, and him to still get over 100 yards. Now, that wasn't 100 yards on the ground as a whole. He had a majority of those came from the receiving yards. But again, he's totaled over 100 yards. He had 3.9 yards per carry and had a solid day. Now, the problem is that one game-losing fumble. It really turned over the game, and that was probably the worst play of the game by the Vikings. But again, as a whole, Vikings offense had a good day. I mean, Justin Jefferson, he might not have gotten 10-plus targets in this game, but again, he had a solid day. He was getting double-teamed. When they double-teamed Justin Jefferson, where does the ball go? Adam Thielen, who had 2 receiving touchdowns in this game. I believe he had 6 receptions on top of that. I mean, they had a good day. The Vikings offense had a good day. It just comes down to that Vikings defense, and we have a Super Bowl offense. We have a Super Bowl offense right now with the best offensive trio in football, the best running back, wide receiver trio in football we have on our roster in purple and gold, and yet we continue to lose games. We have a solid offensive line and great offensive playmakers. And then on special teams, Ryan Fiken, thank you. Thank you for turning this special teams around, because Kene Nwanu is elite. And I've said that, okay, I'm going to take credit real quick. I called it. When the Vikings drafted Kene Nwanu, I called it. I said that was my favorite draft pick. Why? Because he should be a great kick returner in the NFL and a great depth piece to have to your running back. What has he been so far this season? A great kick returner in the NFL and a great running back piece to have as your running back 3 position, because Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison get injured every year. So just a great piece to have on your team, and has been the best rookie on this Vikings team so far. The best offensive rookie. Cam Bynum has actually been unstoppable as well. So it's pretty torn between those 2 players. But again, Kene Nwanu, just great game from him as well. And that leads me on to my next thing. I mean, the Vikings, Ryan Fiken has done a great job as a special teams coordinator. And the Vikings player of the game, once again, for the second week in this NFL season, goes to Kene Nwanu, our rookie out of Iowa State. Our backup, our running back 3 and our starting kick returner had 4 kick returns for 171 return yards, averaging 42.8 yards per return, and had a 99-yard kick return. That is a second 99-yard kick return of the season. Kene Nwanu is elite, and he is playing very well at the kick return position. Is the best kick returner the Vikings have had since Cordero Patterson. He also had 1 offensive carry when Dalvin Cook went down with the injury, had 1 carry for 7 yards, averaging to 7 yards per carry. So as the most yards per carry in this Vikings team so far this season. Just a great year from Kene Nwanu, and excited to see him play going forward. And next week with Dalvin Cook out, we're going to assume Dalvin Cook is going to be out. I mean, real quick, Dalvin Cook is missing all of his stat games. The reason why Dalvin Cook is not top 3 rushing yards in the NFL so far this season is because of his injuries. He's missed a game against Detroit Lions, one of the worst defenses in football. A game against Seattle, another terrible defense in football. And now he's missing another game against Detroit Lions. Those are 3 stat games for Dalvin Cook, and the reason why he's not top 3 in rushing yards so far this season. But again, you don't need to rush Dalvin Cook back against the Detroit Lions defense when you have players like Alexander Mattison and Kene Nwanu and AJ Rose. Let's put that there. AJ Rose might be activated from the practice squad and get a little play time on Sunday. Hope for a fast recovery from Dalvin Cook, a key player in this Vikings offense, and you hate to see him go down with the injury, and has been big for this Vikings offense so far this season. Might not have been as huge as 2019 and 2020, but again, has been a big player on this Vikings offense. We love Dalvin Cook with our team, and I hope he can be back. It's a shoulder injury. He was carted off, so it's rough. It's rough, and you hate to see it. And it's good to know that we have a lot of depth at the running back position. It's really the only position where we have this much depth, where our star can go out, a top 3 running back in the league can go out, and we still can have players step up into that role. But as a whole, Minnesota Vikings 34-26 loss to the 49ers, came up with a must-win. This was a must-win game. I mean, if the Vikings wanted to win the division, they would have had to win this game. The division no longer up for grabs. I know the Vikings beat the Packers a week ago, but the division is no longer up for grabs, as the Packers just beat the Rams and we just lost to the 49ers. So right now we're looking for that 6th seed in the playoffs, 7th seed in the playoffs. Either one, I will take it. But again, this defense going on the road in the playoffs is not going to be good. And we're not good enough. There's really nobody who you can fear in the NFC right now, but we're just not going to make a run for a Super Bowl. And I hate to say that because I wanted it, but if the Vikings don't get home field advantage in the playoffs, I just don't see scenario where the Vikings can make a Super Bowl run. As a whole, we'll be cheering for our Vikings to win next week in and week out, and likely be making the playoffs as a 6 or 7 seed because we are better than any other team, any other 5-win team right now in the NFL. We are better than all other 5-win teams and should be making the playoffs as a 7 seed and going on the road against some of these NFC teams away games, which should be pretty tough. But next week is what we'll be looking at right here. Next week, the Minnesota Vikings will travel to Detroit to take on the amazing, the super fierce Detroit Lions, the winless Detroit Lions, who are 0-10-1. All right, sorry, I slandered the Lions a lot in this podcast. I mean, rightfully so. The Vikings will travel to Detroit to take on the Lions this Sunday at noon. This will be a CBS game. We think this is only our second CBS game of the season so far. Back here, we're tracking the years since the Lions won a playoff game. I believe after the Vikings beat the Lions on Sunday, we'll be adding one more tally mark there because I think it's only week 13 and the Lions will already be eliminated from the playoffs because they're 0-10-1. And even if they win the rest of their games, they won't be making a playoff run. So I think next week, assuming that the Vikings and 49ers win next week, I think that the Lions are eliminated from the playoffs. We also up here, we're tracking if you're watching on YouTube, we're tracking our subscribers. We are almost at 500 subscribers. We're at 486 right now, 14 subscribers away from reaching 500. So if you aren't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe, and that number should be going up and reaching 500. I'm hoping we can reach 500 by the end of the week. So really excited for that. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Morning Kickoff.